you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Kikjihan yuhat duasak, yech na hutsiti, teatan na hutsiti, lumbi ka tuchka yadi. My name is Jordan Gibson. My Tlingit name is Kikjihan, or Standing Frog, and I am of Black and Lumbee ancestry. I am an Indigenous health practitioner and licensed behavior analyst, and I've worked in this field for a little more than a decade, providing behavioral services for those on the autism spectrum. I live in Hawaii and have worked in the Native Hawaiian community of Waianae. The picture you just saw was of Waianae in the Waianae Comprehensive Center. And now I want to introduce my colleague, Chase.
Aloha, Ovao o Chase Koinoa Mua. My name is Chase Rhinelander. I am a behavioral health practitioner who has been working in behavioral health for 3 years. I'm currently a second-year PsyD student with experience working with youth, adolescents, and young adults with different developmental disabilities. I am a Native Hawaiian who has served the people of Hawaii in different capacities, whether that be from working as a registered behavior technician, designing and implementing different social and behavioral programs, as well as designing an executive functioning boot camp. I was fortunate and blessed to be able to attend Kamehameha schools from preschool through graduating high school, and was fortunate and blessed to be developed and grown in such a culturally diverse and sensitive environment. It's great to meet you all.
Thank you, Chase. This is a quick overview of what's going to happen today. We opened in a good way, and then we're going to talk about what brings us to the work, and then we'll share our learning objectives for today, some background. We're going to talk about barriers, and I'm going to give a real life profile from some of my work. And we're going to, as a group, we're going to talk about solutions, conclusions, and takeaways as we enter breakout rooms and then having a big discussion to wrap it up. So I'm really thankful you guys are here today, and I think that some good things will come of this. Antonia, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so now I would like you guys to put in the chat what brings you to this work. Well, it says what brings us to this work because we're in this work with you. So if you want to put in the chat things that brought you to this work, we would love to highlight that. Thank you, Don Marie. That's powerful, Christy. Better understanding of the voices of those that are not always heard. Yes, that's who we deal with. Yes. Mental health is a barrier for kids' regular attendance. Absolutely. Working with Juvenile Wellness Court. Yeah. So I wanted to ask if Auntie Stephanie could talk about, the importance of this work in her experience, because I know that she has been such an integral part of all of this.
Thank you, Nephew Jordan. Actually, I just would like to plant a seed about why it's so important for all of us. I know everybody that is joining this OLE today is joining because you love your youth, your littles, middles, and biggies. And part of what we know in our communities, we've been impacted in not a good way by dominant society, and we don't have enough resources to respond in terms of those impacts. And what we're seeing in our communities, anyone that's working with young people, is especially our young people do not have access to traditional ways to be able to share about their pain, their trauma, are Western behavior health ways. So no matter what your tribal youth program, where it is landing, if it's in the school, if it's after school, if it's working with justice involved youth, making sure that our young people have resources and adults to talk to in order to not only keep them out of the justice system, but to keep them here with us. We've lost too many young people who no longer want to live because they don't have the support and resources to move through the issues that they're facing internally within their family or within the community. So I am grateful for this conversation because we all can contribute to how we connect young people, how we connect families, and most importantly, how we connect schools, Indian Health Services, other health agencies to really invest in behavioral health resources and what we know are best practices in serving Indigenous youth and their families to move forward to thrive. So thank you, Nephew Jordan, and I think we're ready to rock and roll.
I think we are too. Thank you so much, Auntie. Antonia, next slide, please.
So some of the goals for this online learning event. So our first goal is to increase knowledge of common barriers in providing behavioral health services to Native youth through looking at a case study. Our second goal is to identify and discuss solutions that Native communities are utilizing to reverse some of these different barriers.
Next slide, please.
Thank you. So some of the barriers to treatment that I, as a Native Hawaiian, as well as having lived in the communities and having worked with different individuals within the communities, have seen is first the coordination and the consistency of having multiple care providers is somewhat of a deficit, as some of these families seek the needs of multiple different services, whether this be behavioral, educational, outpatient, whether it be speech and language services or different educational services with the family or with different siblings. There's a lot of different hands that touch and a lot of coordination and communication that needs to happen. So this does serve as a barrier to treatment as well within these communities, as there is a lot of turnover with these providers, and having to restart this process is very challenging and is a barrier for Native youth as well as just Native families in general. There is a need for assessments to kind of facilitate other services, as well as the amount of services that you can receive. And with that, assessments are a precedent and are of need within these communities. But a drawback to this is that assessments do need to be administered by people who are qualified and certified within the different aspects of psychology and within those realms of medicine. So assessment does take a while, and there is around a 6 month to a year wait list at times to get evaluations or assessments done for different developmental disabilities. And in pairing that, there is a lot of mistrust just historically within the culture of Hawaii and within Western and Native societies, that there is mistrust and there is often misconceptions and beliefs, which lead to parents as well as families and communities, as it trickles down through these conversations, have some misconceptions and mistrust towards these Western facilities. And I think that the foundation of this is kind of formed through, again, conversations, through families that kind of trickle down through communities. And these feelings of ill will and skepticism also serve as a barrier towards getting our Native population to treatment and to get through some of these different barriers. Could we get to the next slide, please?
Well, thank you, Chase. So now I would like to give some background and discuss a real life profile from my work. Okay, so first I want to talk about Waianae. Waianae is on the west coast of Oahu and is the highest Native Hawaiian population percentage-wise on this island. And my client needed services from a number of different behavioral health providers at the same time. A psychologist, a behavior analyst, a behavior technician, a psychiatrist, a school psychologist, and a social worker. As we know, very rarely our clients and families are needing just one service at a time. This is typical from what I've seen in my work in Hawaii and basically all over. I was the behavior technician on the team, and at the time, we partnered with Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center, and that was a health center located in Waianae, in the community, pretty much in the center of the community. This Native Hawaiian focused health center believed in coordinated care, and coordinated care was instrumental for aligning services for the teen and their family. Before my current position, where you see me at today, I worked at OLE Autism Services, a Native Hawaiian autism service nonprofit, and we received a referral for an at-risk teen. His challenges were representative of the challenges in the community. He was diagnosed not only with autism, but with other learning differences. He was also diagnosed with depression. His mother, who lived in the community, lost custody of both him and his sister. And on top of that, the teen's current foster family was attending family counseling session. This kind of interwoven web of trauma and need for multiple services is present in our families throughout Indian country, and it is our belief that, it's essential for that the services are also interwoven, to combat this interwoven trauma. This is something we were successful at in this instance, and I think we were successful because we kept these common barriers in mind. Okay. So Waianae Comprehensive Center housed the psychologist and the psychiatrist and that worked with the family and was able to provide our teen with assessments in a timely manner so that the behavior analyst and I could provide applied behavior analysis services at OLE Autism. So we were not a part of Waianae Comprehensive Center, but Waianae Comprehensive Center reached out to us to be a part of coordinating their services, just to make things easier. So another thing that Waianae Comprehensive Center did, it trains, placed, and coordinates the school psychologists in elementary school, middle, and high schools around here. And the school psychologist was able to inform us of what the teen was going through in their school environment. The social workers also have a close relationship with the Comprehensive Center. They worked with us to gain an understanding of his foster home situation, and I believe we were able to make a difference in this client's life because of all of this coordination. I think the coordination was key. It helped us on the behavior analysis side. So what we do in applied behavior analysis is, work on social deficit goals and life skills goals, basically for kids and young adults, and a lot of the time adults on the autism spectrum. So this coordination and the communication between the social worker and us, the psychologist and us, and the school psychologist, helped us come up with appropriate goals to work on during our sessions. So let me give you some examples of this. The social worker explained the complicated familial situation and details about the family. The psychologist who worked closely with the foster parents and his sister made it clear to us that the foster parents were not really able to be helpful in a consistent way, And from our interactions with the parents, we found that what the psychologists say to be true. Unfortunately, they were stuck on their foster kids' deficiencies, and when given the opportunity, um, they would kind of, you know, talk about these deficiencies in front of our clients. So, which, we didn't really like in our for our client's sake, who was a young man finishing school, and that it was just not really a great situation. Therefore, we shifted our focus away from parent training, which is normally a big component, and towards building skills that would make him self-sufficient, since he would likely not have consistent support at home. Our programs consisted of, taking the bus, getting to appointments, and also getting to activities so he could, start making age appropriate friends. Um, before he learned to, use the bus system, he was missing all of his different appointments because of, that inconsistency that was going on at home. And so, knowing all of that, we thought it was important for him to be able to utilize and use the bus. And it was also a great way for him to get to two activities to, start making friends and start putting himself in a social arena. He joined the local Special Olympics team, and he was really excited about that. There were, other kids like him who had common interest, which would be sports and stuff. So that was another key reason why we wanted him to take the bus. Um, we also worked on applying for a job and interviewing skills, because we know that we wanted him to be as, independent as possible and working towards a situation where he was living on his own. taking everything and taking everything in this client's life into account and working with other providers allowed us to give the most appropriate services for the situation. He was able to graduate from high school and have a job in the community, and I am confident he will be able to live on his own at some point. Ooh, that was a lot of words, but thank you for listening to that. Here we go to the next slide, Antonia. And let me pass it to Chase. Is this you or is this me?
I can take over. I can take over.
Yeah.
So within the case as a whole, Waianae Coast Comprehensive Center, or WCCHC, has traditionally and historically shown to be a site that not only prioritizes and is very influential within communities, but also seeks to empower and train future clinicians of Native Hawaiian and other Indigenous heritage. I know from different supervisors that I've had within my experience within the community that Waianae Coast has just continued to grow and improve over time, with whether that be implementing more evidence-based treatments, doing more culturally sensitive and sensitizing training within the community and within their own organization. They've definitely done the groundwork to improve relations, not only with breaking down the different barriers that Native communities and Native Hawaiians specifically have within that area and within Hawaii, but also more generally and more specifically within families and within schools, which is of great importance to breaking down and getting access to these different services to the Native Hawaiian people. Moving down the line, autism centers and services that have cultural significance and importance is also something that's very, very frequently and almost regularly employed at Waianae Coast Comprehensive, and is an area of focus as developmental disabilities are something that are being diagnosed more, and we are getting more information and awareness on as we interact with people with this disability through a cultural lens. Within the Waianae Coast some of the services they offer do include ceremonial trainings as well as cultural trainings within different aspects of Native Hawaiian healing, which is also implemented in these different autism services. I
Let
think,
me just jump. Can I jump in here
yeah,
real quick, Chase?
yeah.
Sorry. I wanted to talk about, the cultural relevancy part and how important it is because, in our communities, you know, from the past, there were places for people who we see in Western society as not having a place, and so something that was really nice about Waianae Comprehensive and having that lens, that Native Hawaiian lens, is that there's more options, there's more ways to, apply treatment, there's different ways to find purpose. And that is something that our communities have. It's a strength for ours. Like an example of this is, we had a kid who was often in trouble, but he loved the traditional tattoos, right? So that student, you know, we found, an alternate pathway for him where he could feel value and he could, one, feel a part of the culture, but also, play to his strengths. And that's something in our native communities. We have, different ways and different places, whether it's subsistence, whether it's art, that we can build our young people up. And I really think that Waianae Comprehensive did a great job of, elevating these these different pathways, and I think that that's something that we can all do in our communities. Another thing that Waianae Comprehensive did was, the community around them, they were very intentional about helping community members get into the field of mental health or get into the field of behavioral health, where they would take interns, as Chase said, that were Native Hawaiian. They would take interns from the immediate area and, help these students become whatever they want to become in behavioral health, whether it's social work or whether it's working with students with autism, like I was, and like Chase does. So that part is very important because, growing your own is something that they really, subscribe to. And as Chase was talking about earlier, there's a big barrier is turnover, and turnover is hard when you're trying to coordinate care. So sorry for jumping in, Chase, but you said
No,
something that,
no. I think
you know.
it's a perfect little segue because I mean we also have to think in terms of some of the barriers as well with the mistrust and some of the misconceptions that some people may have regarding some of these community and comprehensive facilities. And I think in some of that too, I want to touch on is like it's not purely limited to educational or behavioral stuff as well. Like Waianae Coast Comprehensive works with like the medical school within Hawaii. So like they have a lot more access to not just only like behavioral or educational professions, but also medical professions, which, are very important and significant, well, not with only within Native communities, but within Western communities as well. And I also wanted to kind of feed back on that. The cultural relevancy is also like I feel like it's been reciprocated both ways, like within the community, and it's kind of showed like with what Waianae sought to do and, really investing within their communities. There's been a lot of positive growth and change, I would say, in terms of people's willingness to have conversations regarding different issues, whether that be with learning challenges, mental health challenges, or even just systemic generational traumas that people have had to work through. And I think through this and just through seeking to understand and just people seeking to have these types of conversations that these barriers are slowly being broken down more and more over time, which is, extremely influential for not only the youth, but, the future that's still yet to come.
Thanks, Chase.
And I don't think, yeah.
Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Yeah, so some key takeaways here, right? The coordinating of services, right? That was something that what if we're relaying it back to the case study, the coordination of services was extremely helpful for us to have a full picture of what was going on and for us to plan on what we would like for our client in the future. Promoting culture, right? It's a Native Hawaiian community with a lot of mistrust, as we talked about. So promoting culture is important, right? Because this is our people, this is our culture. We couldn't separate the two. So that was something that is important for coordinating care. You know, linking practitioners and community. It's hard when your practitioners are either from the outside or they're not, or they haven't ingratiated themselves into the community, because it's hard to build trust there if people don't know who you are or where you're from. And I think that, like Chase was saying, it's a two-way street, because then the providers themselves who feel like outsiders aren't really invested in staying as much, right? So, and then promoting accessibility. When we coordinate care between the different providers, then we can, make things easier for our clients, right? When it's like, oh, I know that my client needs dental, and even though this is a behavioral health situation, I can, talk with the dental provider and be like, hey, we also need to get this kid in for this. And if we're all on the same page, we don't run into so many lapses, which I've seen so much. Like, one thing is being taken care of, and then another thing is being, neglected. And that doesn't really serve our communities best. So thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, now since I've been talking so much, sorry to everyone, especially Chase.
No.
We're gonna have a chance for us to, discuss together in small breakout rooms, and then we will come back for a larger group discussion. So the two questions that we are going to, talk about in our breakout rooms are: what are some ways that behavioral health can be better coordinated in your community? And then, who are key people in your community that can help create a coordinated care system? So, these breakout rooms are going to be, solution focused and kind of like a brainstorming session. So I'm excited to see what you guys come up with, and then we'll bring it back into a larger group discussion. Okay. So Antonia, can you get our breakout rooms together? Oh, she's on it. Antonia is the best. Thank you so much.
Nice, thanks.
See you guys in about 8 minutes. Well, it looks like we just jumped into the tail end of an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Breakout group one, we're a lot of ideas bouncing off the walls.
That's amazing. Okay, so now I would like for us from the small breakout rooms to bring into a bigger discussion of if we heard anything in our breakout rooms that we would want to highlight or bring into this bigger group discussion. Let's start with some ways that behavioral health can be better coordinated in your community. Is there something that anyone would like to highlight? I am in one of my previous lives, I was a middle school teacher, so I can start calling on people. Mm,
I mean, I can kind of get the ball rolling with like some of the stuff that like we kind of ended with in breakout group one, but we were
perfect.
kind of talking about I guess like in terms of like barriers also like the provider desert that kind of exists out there, and not just like the provider desert from like a cultural aspect, but also like a physical distance kind of aspect as well. Like there are some communities out there in which, you know, there are not providers for the specific age range or specific demographic or population, and it kind of turns into a bigger gap in treatment where they try to force people through the system, and you know, once they kind of exit, they're no longer of like your responsibility. So like there's like that kind of physical provider desert, as well as like with the cultural aspect, as well as like the physical distance as well. Like sometimes like we were discussing with like Teresa earlier, there's, you know, sometimes you have to commute like 2 to 3 hours to go get a 1 hour service. So it's like, is 6 hours of travel equate to the 1 hour of services? And as well as trying to facilitate more interconnectedness between the different tribes and agencies to, you know, kind of mind these gaps in treatment and try to, you know, bridge them in what different ways that they can.
Hmm. That's a really good point. Thanks, Chase.
Yeah.
Teresa, I saw you come up. Did you want to add more?
No, I don't think so. I think I don't know that everybody heard, the part of the conversation that we were having, but I think that was like the biggest piece is like those barriers of being able to provide for the youth when it's hard enough to get services for the adults, much less the youth. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that was mentioned was that that the providers seem to want to wait for the youth to get a bit older so then they can then service them. Insurance is also a barrier. So it seems we've got a pretty good list of barriers that we in that short period of time that we were able to come up with. But I think the biggest piece for me as a TA really support trying to support our grantee relatives is to encourage to build relationships with those partner mental health provider partners within the community or in a virtual sense because there is a lot of times huge distances between the providers. So
Hmm.
that was
Thank
just
you.
some of the things
And
we
if
were.
you,
I'm actually from Seminole Nation, Oklahoma. We actually have a MOU with Creoaks, who's a behavioral health here. They will do the assessment, the intake and the assessment online, and because we're maybe an hour and a half away from where they are, but they'll do the assessment. I try to facilitate, help them in any way I can with the children coming into my office, and I will have laptops for them to actually do the assessment. And then the counselor actually drives this way to my office, and I'll have a room for them to sit in and do the family function therapy. So that actually helps out a lot here where I am.
Nephew Jordan, there's a really good response in the chat box from Christy if you want to read it. And then also after that, thinking about solutions, the one that was brought up in our breakout room about nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Auntie. Bringing these conversations. So Christy's saying, bringing youth into these conversations as often as possible, really listening to what their needs are around behavioral health and what they would like the access to look and what they would like access to look for them. Absolutely, right. Thank you so much, Christy, for bringing that into this conversation. So often our youth, it's like so many things being happened around them and to them, and you know they deserve agency and what they want and who they want to be, and how can us as adults in the community and as providers help our youth get to where they want to be, not necessarily what we think should happen always. So we should definitely be mindful about listening to our youth in our community, and because the world is changing and they're more on the pulse of what's going on than we are. So I think that their voice should always be highlighted and elevated. Thank you so much, Christy. Um, and to talk about, another great solution we heard in our chat. I forget which breakout room our number was, but I wonder if Deborah could come off and then, talk about what you talked about in terms of solutions for our group discussion. Thank you so much.
Sure, I'm happy to. We are always looking for ways to help the youth. And one of the things that I recently did, I was sitting on a grant program through United Way, and I met with one of our local providers, the Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Facility, and they were seeking grant funding for a youth mental health program. And they were having trouble getting information out to the community of, this was a new service that they were providing, and they only had 9 youth. As we all know, a lot of local schools, they don't want you to just send flyers home with their children, just about anything that you might be offering. And so one of the things that I did, I wanted to make a connection with our community, Prairie Island. And so Judge Jones and I are going to meet with Hiawatha Mental Health Facility and find out exactly what they're offering, how it works, and then we'll bring in our family services, our social workers, to look at that and make that connection final. But I would just say, look to your local United Way, look to your local nonprofits. A lot of them have some really good services available that you might not think of, and they're always a wealth of information. So nonprofits are always good in my mind, and just keep those connections rolling.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you. Sure.
Something else we talked about in my group discussion was, and also I wanted to highlight from the presentation itself, is growing our own, right? Helping those in the community who want to get into the behavioral health space do that. Because when we have behavioral health practitioners from the community, what we've seen is that there's lower turnover, and that there is, more buy-in from the community itself. And I know that's a long process, and each community will have to figure out ways that they can facilitate that. But I think that that is definitely a solution to some of these issues here. And I know not everywhere has the big comprehensive center or even a health comprehensive center. So that's why the second question is about key people in the community that can help, create a coordinated care system and can help, people become behavioral health practitioners. So I was wondering if anyone would like to speak to that. Courtney, could you, if you're there, I know that you're busy with your son's practice, I think, but if there's anything that you could add or highlight to this conversation, that would be amazing.
Thank you. Yes, and I apologize. I hope you don't mind if I stay off of the video. A lot of background things going on. So yeah, no, it's a very interesting conversation. It's good to hear a lot of the good thoughts around some of the problems. We can identify the gaps and the problems all day long. It's exciting when we begin to look at solutions. And so I love your question about who are key people. I kind of want to frame it I'm gonna introduce something here. I want to frame it in a cultural framework perspective for those that might be familiar with traditional ways of taking care of one another. Our tribal nations, indigenous populations have always had ways to take care of one another, and today we call them ceremonies, right? And there's all kinds of different ceremonies for different things. They're always meaningful and purposeful. But there's a few common elements that you find within every ceremony, and one of those is that planning and that preparation piece, kind of getting ready for it, right? And you have to identify who needs to be there, who are we inviting, who should be a part of this conversation, and then that's what your question is getting to. And then we move into our commitment phase of a ceremony, because you have to know why you're doing it, right? And so while we're reaching out to our partners and collaborators, really having the conversations and grounding in the youth, in the families that they're connected with, in the services that our collaborators are providing. You know, everybody wants to utilize their services, maximize the opportunities that they have available. And so when we frame our conversations very specific around the youth and family and how we can work together, we begin to create this dialogue around commitment. And then we get into our planning phase, or our follow-through phase, where we really kind of come together. We create this what we're creating for our youth, right? For our kids and our family. And a part of that piece is in each ceremony, you always find this piece of sacrifice, where it becomes hard and difficult and challenging. And that's when but here's the thing about sacrifice, is it's always very temporary. And a lot of times when it's structured within ceremony, we're preparing for it. And typically when things get hard, that's when people fall away, slide away, don't return to phone calls or whatever it might be. And so when we can plan for the challenges ahead with all those groups that we pulled together, we can be very strategic about what our MOUs look like, what our written agreements look like, and how we're going to collaborate. And because I also heard that in one of in our breakout discussion, is that we have MOUs, but they don't always apply to the needs of the youth or with our situation. And so again, it's being very clear and transparent, and putting in processes where those MOUs and agreements can adjust, because they're going to need to. We're dealing with people's lives, and things change as we learn more. And then there's always that other piece of the ceremony of rest and reflection. And we call that, in this world, we call it evaluation. So how are we evaluating our effectiveness, our collaboration, we're working together? So these are just kind of some big picture thoughts that come to mind as I'm hearing some of the discussions. But, you know, I know it can be discouraging, but trying to frame it in a way that we're really trying to take care of our young people. We're really trying to take care of the families. And that's a ceremony. And so when we can bring it with that same energy of pulling people together, being very direct with the challenges, the sacrifices that organizations are going to have to make, and that we can make, so that way we understand who can do what, and we can it'll help within our conversations. Of course, there's a lot of detail that goes into things, but coordinating systems is a very powerful thing. You know, we're bringing our healers together, and so respecting what people can offer and utilizing those services is the key, and that's the goal. So those are just some thoughts that I had. So, but thank you for allowing me a few minutes here.
No, thank you. That was such a powerful way to, you know, frame this conversation, and such an important one. And, you know, I'm happy I can always count on you to do things like that. So thanks again. Can we go to the next slide, Antonio? Oh, we'll do that. So here are some resources. You will be sent this PowerPoint with some resources about integrated care systems. And there's also, you know, a webinar on the same topic, if there's more information that you guys would like about integrated care and the process of going about creating that's kind of a system. Next slide, please. And also, please complete the end of session evaluation. this evaluation assists us in planning future online learning events, and we would really love your feedback. I would also like to highlight in the chat, Christy, who worked for a Indigenous-led, youth serving organization, and that developed an internship program with youth with lived experience in behavioral health, and helping them become certified peers. That those kind of programs are what's needed in, our communities. And you can email me. Auntie Stephanie put my email in the chat. So please email me with any questions. Heather, I see your question about putting it into practice, and we're wrapping up here, but email me and then we can talk about it. But also maybe that's something we can bring up in another online learning event. All right, in closing, I would just want to say, just thank you so much for being here, allowing me in this space to speak. And I really want to highlight Chase, who's an upcoming Native practitioner and a psychology student who will be a doctor pretty soon. So Chase, I wanted to give you the final words as the future of this field. No pressure.
Thank you. I just want to say mahalo nui loa for allowing me to join in the conversation with you all today. I feel I learned just as much from the work I do than I hope the people learn from my work. And I hope that we can just continue to be collaborative and stay interconnected throughout this process of growth and change, and maybe continue to make the future bright. Thank you.
Thank you. Please have an amazing rest of your day.